It's time to bounce back beyond tomorrow. Join us for a two-part series in our Women in Gaming campaign as we chat to the head and strategic advisor for the National Gambling Board in South Africa, Ms. Caroline Kongwa, who also serves on the Board of Trustees for IAGR. Good day, everyone. We trust that you are well and are keeping safe. Today, we have the honor of connecting digitally with a phenomenal woman in gaming. This woman wears many hats and has been heading up the National Gambling Board of South Africa from 2014. She is also the Chief Strategic Advisor for the organization. However, that's not all. Since October 2019, she has also been serving on the Board of Trustees for IAGR. Allow me to introduce to you the phenomenal Miss Caroline Kongwa. Hi, Caroline, and welcome.
Hi, Nestle. Thank you for inviting me.
How are you doing today, Caroline?
I'm good, thank you.
That's awesome. We're glad to hear that. So, Caroline, shall we get right into it?
Yes.
Cool, great. Caroline, with the COVID-19 pandemic continuing to cause disruption to the gambling industry across South Africa, affecting the retail side of the industry in particular, what are your key priorities and goals to keeping the industry going?
Okay, thank you, Nestle. To start with, as South Africa, we regulate, or rather gambling is legalized, and we regulate 4 modes of gambling. So these modes include the casino sector. Betting is permitted on legal contingencies, for example, the outcome of a horse race, and also the outcome of sports. And then we have the LPM sector that basically has limited functionality. So the machines look like casino slot machines. However, there's limited functionality in terms of payout and the stakes, and including prizes that you can win. And then we also have the bingo sector, which over time indeed has transformed, and we also have electronic bingo terminals. So in terms of the composition, we have an industry, and we're regulating an industry that derives approximately 31 billion in gross gambling revenue. And we have the casinos that basically account for the largest share of that gross gambling revenue at 60.5%. It's followed by the betting sector, which is at 23.5%, 10% of the limited payout machine sector, and then bingo, which is the smallest contributor. But not to say that, it's the lowest or slowest growth. So the main economic benefit we derive is definitely revenue, that government derives in form of taxes and levies collected. And then why I'm also giving this a little bit of a background, just to link with the priorities that you've asked us, is these revenues are indeed an important tool for the administration of the fiscal policy in form of government expenditure, and tax and levies that we collect from the industry then would go towards economic development, infrastructure improvement, building of schools, clinics, you name it. And then also it's used to advance small, micro, medium enterprises, and licensees that provincial licensing authorities actually license also contribute to corporate social investments. So in terms of priority, post-COVID, we definitely looking at and have considered, not only as the National Gambling Board, we are the national regulator, but we do, in terms of the Constitution, have to work with provincial licensing authorities. So we definitely have ensured that there's alignment to the government's risk-adjusted strategy within the era of this COVID-19 pandemic. And everyone has been working towards returning to economic activity and the strategy. So as announcements have been made, through even COPTA and everyone being encouraged to return to economic activity, what it is we've put in place has been to ensure that as a priority, risk of transmission is minimized. At the same time, there's economic value that is derived from the operation. So due to the lockdown, almost all operators had to close. It was with the exclusion of the betting sector that could still present their gambling products by a punter or a gambler placing a bet online, hence I was saying almost all. And then we've been looking at also the economic stress. Definitely in that area, you'd find a situation where priorities may change. And I think we'll get into that later on, where it's really up to, every licensee and also regulators to see how we can minimize the impact or the negative impact on the economy due to COVID, and then also promotion of community well-being and the livelihood of those who are most vulnerable. So I can just pause there for now.
Great, great. Caroline, with some properties reopening and others yet to, recently it was announced that we will be moving to level 2 in South Africa. So it is likely that any brick and mortar sites will look very different than at the start of 2020. What do you think the new normal will look like for gambling businesses and for their customers?
Okay. As a start, yes, indeed. I think not only from level 2, I think we could go back even to level 3 when the tourism sector definitely gave direction on how within, for example, a casino establishment, measures should be employed to ensure preventative measures definitely adhered to. So there's an amount of directions or directives and regulations that have been published. So as a start, an ordinary gambling licensee is an employer. And from that perspective, there have been directives from, for example, from Department of Labor on return to work and how any employer should deal or implement preventative measures for their employees. Then the social distancing guidelines that one would have to adhere to, and all operators and employers are encouraged to have preventative plans. So considering how prior COVID, for example, any gambling establishment would be set up, you would have a situation where they were in place, for example, requirements that any licensee should ensure they have to adhere to. For example, a slot machine would have to be a certain distance from the next one. But what we have seen some operators do is, as part of the new normal, licensees have had to innovate to ensure that they are protecting their customers and also employees. So we've seen a situation where, for example, some licensees have actually put screens between the machines so that, or for example, they have been strategies in place where every alternate machine is switched off and then a screen is placed. So what one is saying is definitely this presents a situation where the old way of operating would definitely be different. Then knowing very well that gambling is more a contact leisure that one would have to adhere to, you have to go to an establishment. You have to interact, for example, table games. You have to interact with the card dealer who's at the table and overseeing, for example, a game of roulette. So what definitely has happened is, from the perspective of regulators, provincial gambling regulators, they've definitely given direction on how every operator would have to ensure they go about their operations. And this is over and above, the regulations I referred to that government has already published. What will normal be or mean? It would be that any business would have to re-strategize and definitely reconsider whether in the long term, the way in which they are managing their business or the way in which they are offering their products is actually sustainable. Mm-hmm. To me, also, the new normal would include the fact that for any business to want to remain relevant, then one would have to ensure that their strategy with regards to the gambling industry definitely would have to align to basically whatever threat is out there. Mm-hmm. So, but in terms of threat, I'm basically talking about a disruptor. A disruptor exactly like COVID-19. How do you guard against any disruptor? And one would want to, going forward, in trying to establish what the new normal should be, because I would say it's work in progress. We're still trying to evaluate and understand the impact of what COVID-19 has been on gambling operations and even the industry at large. Government is also going through that. So in doing that, definitely there'll have to be a reconsideration to try and get to the point to resolve what the new normal will be. But in the meantime, it's definitely, adhering to, the preventative measures and also ensuring that one is able to continue for those who can, for those maybe where business totally failed, it would be to resuscitate or re-strategize on, another way in which one can derive economic value in whatever business venture then one has gone about. So that's how I'd put together, what it is the new normal will be. It's still early. After COVID, I think we're only beginning to understand what the impact has been. And yes, the first thing would be revenue, but also going forward, how should one basically structure their business?
Great. Thank you for that very concise answer, Caroline. I understand, and I'm sure the industry understands that it's constantly a work in progress. I mean, COVID, like you say, was a disruptor, and it came and it disrupted, and now we have got to work together to move the industry forward. In saying, the pandemic has seen many industries evolve and adapt digitally due to widespread lockdowns and closures of retail properties, especially in the hospitality industry. With online gambling currently not regulated in South Africa, is further regulation into the digital space something that NGB is currently exploring? And if so, how can the NGB and supporting stakeholder groups work together to ensure any regulation is implemented effectively with customer safety and responsible gambling are at the forefront and front of mind?
Very, very interesting. Considering, what we have is basically, the introduction of 5G, and also technology has been evolving. The other issue is prior to COVID, we were talking a lot about what the impact would be, in terms of the fourth industrial revolution, and then COVID overtook that debate. So just going back to, so that would be the foundation from which, one would be talking about regarding further regulation in the digital space. So in terms of our regulatory framework, online gambling is not regulated in South Africa, and it's not legal at the moment. We as government or as government regulators have to ensure that we regulate gambling, and in that sense, it's the gambling activity. Now, for those who understand the gambling industry, definitely it's a highly technologically driven industry, because if you look at the value chain from the manufacturing of games, and for a punter to interact with the game, then it involves technology. Basically the collection of data, reports on gambling activity, how the machines are performing, that involves technology. We in the four modes of gambling that are permitted, in South Africa, and in terms of our regulatory framework, our licensees and manufacturers are not restricted in adapting or adopting latest technologies. Mm-hmm. However, that needs to be within the ambit. Mm-hmm. So online gambling and the offering of online gambling, it would basically, we often define it where a punter or someone gambling would have to interact on an online platform, and not basically even gambling from the comfort of their home. So it wouldn't necessitate an individual to go to a gambling establishment. So definitely considering online gambling would require a policy shift, because our national gambling policy basically outlaws it. And then another thing is the digital space is having and will continue to have a significant impact on the gambling industry. And indeed, it raises a wide scope of new challenges and demands for regulators. We are aware definitely of other gambling jurisdictions that offer online gambling and the lessons. So within this context, and considering what the impact of COVID would be, one could argue to say, okay, perhaps there should be a consideration of online gambling. Mm-hmm. And definitely there's quite a lot of work that would have to go into such a consideration. Mm-hmm. One would definitely have to look at even South Africa's industrial strategy. For example, casinos that are more integrated resorts, in the sense that they operate in the gambling industry, they also operate in the tourism industry, and they provide, certain infrastructure. It would be, also for a licensee, for example, a casino licensee, mm-hmm. to make an assessment, whether online gambling operations would actually basically even overtake or derive more revenue than they are deriving currently in terms of their licensing model. I don't think it's an easy thing for me to answer at this point in time whether it would be a consideration, because those who have invested, for example, in the integrated resorts, like what casinos present, it's been years and years of investment in infrastructure, and there's an economic spin-off that comes from that, which is creation of jobs, other business opportunities that come from, having those establishments, for example, hotels, hosting conferences. So there would be quite a lot that one would have to consider. For other modes of gambling, perhaps it would be easier, but we're still at the point where we are continuously looking into how other jurisdictions have fared. We also, during the pandemic, we've also considered how for example, other jurisdictions, online gambling didn't necessarily derive, the most revenue. And then there's also various factors that come and impact that. For example, due to the COVID pandemic, if one has lost employment, will they necessarily sit at home and gamble, with money they don't have? One also has to consider over time how, in a way, technology impacts on who exactly your gambler is or your punter is. It sort of like changes the profile, because one can use the bingo industry as an example where, some years ago it was more, punters of a particular age group. And over time we've done this research, who would rather come together, socialize and interact in the game. And over time with technology, you found a situation where, for the game of bingo, you have an individual who would rather interact still with the game, but, on an electronic bingo terminal. So with the use of technology, definitely it brings various facets to who exactly even your gambler is. And we've seen that over time. A lot of individuals definitely are techno savvy. We have all these gadgets that one can say we can't do without. Our gadgets even this time have become our computers. It's so easy to even do business using your phone. Most phones are as powerful, or some phones, are as powerful as a laptop. There's so much you can do in terms of just functionality.
Yeah.
So technology in the fourth industrial revolution, to be specific, it definitely would usher in new innovation in the industry. And it would be interesting, yes, to see how then our licensees respond to that, and basically how it is they would be presenting to regulators, how it is they can improve, or how through technology, their business operations can improve. So that would be an area of collaboration. I don't think it's a consideration that gambling regulators can actually do on their own, because we are responsible to ensure that the laws that we develop basically enable, the industry to thrive.
Yes.
So, it's also not a clear cut. At times, there has been the debate that should we promulgate technology neutral laws, or should we rather amend laws as technology evolves? And on the latter, it's quite difficult because, there's various industries out there. The gambling industry is so diverse. Yes. And it would be a challenge to always promulgate laws to cater for a technological change, or even a disruptor. So, definitely there's room to sit down and talk, because I wouldn't have the answer, at this point in time, whether it's actually our current legislative framework that would be restricting innovation, because they are, they are stakeholders who are of that view. And then there's the other view where, look, you could actually always tailor make, and analyze and strategize and see how, as technology evolves, whether, you can sustain your operations. So, yeah, I know I haven't given you an absolute answer, but there's a lot involved in considering whether, one would be definitely, looking at regulation of online gambling, and whether we are there, because the stakeholders who have made the current models work, definitely would be key to hear from them, whether they are willing to lose all the investment they've made, and only consider online gambling, or whether it would be complementary. So yeah, only the outcome of further discussions and debate would basically, resolve that. Yeah.
Great, thank you for that, Caroline. I'm actually looking forward to Ice Africa Digital, where we unpack a lot more of this to not only, look at the industry to survive. I mean, we don't want the industry just to survive. Like you say, we want the industry to thrive. Yeah. Caroline, thank you so much for your time today. It was great hearing your insight into the gaming industry in South Africa, as well as your thoughts on COVID-19 and the impact it has had on the gaming industry in South Africa. So we would like to say thank you, stay safe, stay blessed, and stay beautiful.
Thank you, Nestle. Thanks. Keep well.
Stay tuned to our Women in Gaming campaign as we highlight more phenomenal women in the gaming industry in Africa. And look out for episode 2 in our 2-part series with the head and strategic advisor for the National Gambling Board in South Africa, Miss Caroline Kongwa. Bounce back beyond tomorrow, Ice Africa Digital, from the 27th to the 29th of October 2020. We'll catch you online.